Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Sunday morning, the 12th of January. And no footage from the fields this morning because I didn't go there. The snow has all but melted. Yeah, we're getting back to normal. Alright, as promised, I want to do a refresher on the timeline in the Delphi case. So there's kind of two separate timelines, if you will. There's the timeline that the prosecution people think pins Richard Allen to the scene at the time that the murders took place, which comes from the PCA. And then there's the timeline that was introduced at the trial, which is based on Libby's phone data. So we're going to look at them both. We're also going to consider one thing that was introduced at the trial as a piece of information that only the killer would know, and it had a big impact on the juror who has come out and spoken to the Murder Ship podcast, and that's the white van. So we're going to talk about all of that. Let's go.
It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Before an angry Andrew Baldwin left the courthouse, 13 News overheard him speaking to Richard Allen's wife, saying, "It ain't over. The world's watching. The world sees what's going on."
Alright, let's start with the timeline that we are all familiar with if you've been following this case. We start at 127, 126, 127, and a black Ford Focus was seen on the Hoosier Harvest Store camera. This is the Hoosier Harvest Store. This is County Road North. The Morning High Bridge is down here. Alright, so a black Ford Focus was seen travelling west on County Road North. A juror question at the trial asked, well, how many black Ford Focuses were in the area? And they had to go away and Google it, and they got the answer. And oh, there was only one. What, only one black Ford Focus in the entire area? I mean, what did you do? Just look at a mile radius of this location, or what? Ford Focuses are common vehicles, aren't they? My mother has a Ford Focus. Look, come on. And also, there's a bunch of other vehicles that look like Ford Focuses. You know, 1965 Comets look like Ford Focuses. So, allegedly, this is where Rick Allen parked his black Ford Focus. And then he walked down this path to the Freedom Bridge, and then he saw 3 juvenile girls. We know that Rick Allen, in his February 2017 interview with Dan Dullard, that he did see 3 juvenile females, and 3 juvenile females saw a man. You know, one of those juvenile girls, 5'7", she said, well, he's taller than me. So what you're looking at, 5'10", 6 foot even. Not a really small guy. Not one witness said that the guy they saw was really small. And Rick Allen is, 5'4", 5'5". So for a guy, that's really small. It's the first thing you'd notice about him, really. So anyway, they were there around 126. There's a photo taken in this location. Like, they went to the trails and they were heading back. So there's a photo taken by one of the juvenile females that has a timestamp of 126. So they were in the vicinity of this area when they saw the man. And every single juvenile said something different. Not one of them saw a man that described Rick Allen. But anyway, so 126, according to the state's timeline, Rick Allen's here, walks down here. So this is only a short path. I don't know what took him so long to get to the Morning High Bridge, but maybe he was walking really slowly because he only got little legs. All right. So around 148, Abby and Libby were dropped off here at the Mears Farm entrance of the trails. And Kelsey, Libby's sister, her vehicle was seen at 1:49, going west, passing the Hoosier Harvest Store camera. So the girls were dropped off 1:47, 1:48. They walked down here. Now, around 2 p.m, witness Betsy Blair, who is a great witness, but the defence didn't get the opportunity to question her properly because they were told that they couldn't. And the two sketches, they weren't allowed in the trial. The old guy sketch that was based on Sarah Carbo's description, who we're not even going to mention because, the juror that was interviewed by the Murder Ship podcast didn't believe her anyway. So we're not going to talk about her. But her sketch, also based on the appearance of Bridge Guy, which is a bit strange, but hey, was released. It was June 2017. And then in April of 2019, Betsy Blair's sketch was released to the public. And that was the change of direction press conference, as I call it. Betsy Blair said this is a 10 out of 10. This is absolutely the guy she saw. Around 2 p.m, on the Morning High Bridge, a young man in his 20s with dark, poofy hair. That's not Rick Allen, is it? No. Okay. She's around here at 2. She thinks she saw Abby and Libby. So they must have been walking down and maybe she was walking back or whatever. But she thinks she saw Abby and Libby. So they were heading towards the bridge. But by the time they got to the bridge, there was no man inside. So the man with the poofy hair had disappeared. Richard Allen wasn't there. Richard Allen, by the way, has a completely separate timeline to this. He said he was on the trails between about 12 and 1:30, and he would have left the area by about 1:40, 1:45. That was what he said in 2022. But we can't even prove that Rick Allen said he was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30. We can't prove that, even though it's in Dan Dullard's notes. Because Dan Dullard said he thought he taped all his interviews, but this one, miraculously disappeared. So, anyhow, Betsy Blair goes back to her life, and she thinks she saw a vehicle parked at the old CPS building, but it looked like her dad's 1965 Comet. A couple of other people who didn't get interviewed for the trial, wonder why, also saw a vehicle parked at the old CPS building. One of them thought it was a purple PT Cruiser. Another one thought it was a smart car, not a black Ford Focus. Okay, so Libby took 2 photos in the 2 o'clock hour on the bridge. One just off the bridge, and then one which is timestamped 2:07, but it doesn't appear anywhere on Libby's phone. So that's a bit strange. But anyway, at 2:13 is when the Bridge Guy video starts. That Libby was a hero for taking. She caught her killer on camera, allegedly. 43 seconds, and it appears to have been taken here from the south end of the bridge, with BG walking this way. So that is what we learnt from the PCA. We didn't have any more information than that, like from official channels, until the trial. At the trial, we hear about a white van that just plays into the state's theory. What's the state's theory, Michelle? Okay, I'll tell you. The state's theory is that Rick Allen kidnapped Abby and Libby with the intention of essaying them. Now, there's no signs of essay on their bodies, but not all essay leaves a mark, shall we say. So it's possible that one or both of the girls were essayed and there's no evidence of it. It happens, sadly, all too often. Apparently, according to the state's theory, he was disturbed. So instead of essaying them, he just murdered them, just like slashed their throats. The big point that really impressed the juror who spoke to the Murder Ship podcast is that there is a white van, or a van. It's been morphed into a white van because A white van has been mentioned so many times. Why? Because Brad Webber, who was going here to the Webber property, had a white van. So let's talk about the white van man. All right, this is Brad Webber. Now, he doesn't live at that property. That's his mother's property. But his mother was away because she has other properties. I think she was in Arizona. So he was staying there, like house sitting, I guess. Now, he works right down here at the Subaru plant. He's got to go from here to here. His work records have him leaving at 2:02. The state put him here at around 2:30, which, yeah, all right, there's time. 31 minutes, 32 minutes, 36 minutes. Just in enough time to disturb Rick Allen, who's essaying the girls somewhere around here. He comes by, Brad Webber comes by to go to this property, disturbs Rick Allen, and Rick Allen takes the girls over the creek to this crime scene, which is approximately here. This is the longitude and latitude coordinates in the Ron Logan search warrant, but in actual fact, the crime scene spread quite a few yards. So it's just in this general vicinity is the crime scene where the girls' bodies were found, where the F tree was, where the evidence was here. Okay, so around 2:30, Brad Webber is driving along here, disturbs Rick Allen. He panics, takes the girls over the creek and murders them. That's the state's theory. And on the stand, at the trial, Andrew Baldwin asked Brad Webber if he drove straight home on February 13th, to which Webber said he went home to drop off a trailer. Baldwin had information from Brad Webber's interview in 2017. And he said, wasn't that earlier in the day? Didn't you go and service your ATM machines, because he had a second job, before you went home that day? This prompted Brad Webber to scream, "That's not correct!" and to deny Baldwin multiple times. He came back to be interviewed by the defence and he was a little bit calmer, but maintained that he was there shortly before 2:30, not 3:30 to 3:40, as we've all known since the year dot. This was the gotcha moment by the state, and the jury bought it. The jury absolutely bought it. Because this is a detail that only the killer would know. This is the one and only confession from Rick Allen amongst the 60-odd that he made while being tortured in Westville that had any substance to it. But we've known about a van, a white van, because Brad Webber had a white van. We've known about the white van since 2017. There's been theories that have incorporated the white van in one way or another. Some people have considered Brad Webber being a suspect because he's got a temper. I've never considered him a suspect because we've always been told that he wasn't there when the girls were on the bridge. He got home at 3:30 to 3:40. So now Brad Webber gets home at 2:30. He's talked himself, in my opinion, into being a suspect. But the jury bought it, because that was the detail that only the killer would know. Who did Rick Allen make that confession to? His psychologist, Monica Waller. The one and only time that he wasn't recorded whilst he was at Westville. And then she shredded her notes. So we don't actually know that Rick Allen said anything of the kind. We don't know that it was Monica Waller who introduced this, because she was in a bunch of Delphi Facebook groups. Presumably she was all over social media taking in information. So the jury have been duped. They've absolutely been duped. This is what Andrew Baldwin and Jennifer Auger, in their interview with Wish TV, said about this issue.
But then they said none of this applies to Rick Allen because he's a safekeeper. Well, he's a pretrial detainee. He's innocent. He should have more rights. And he became psychotic. I think when you look at his so-called incriminating statements, I killed the girls, I think I killed the girls, and there's no detail to any of those. And that they're, at the same time, there's the blank look in his eye. He's lost, I don't know what percentage of his body weight. He's covering himself in feces. He's eating feces. He is clearly psychotic. They're dosing him up with Halidol against his will. So, and that's when the incriminating statements, and there's only one of those statements that has any detail whatsoever, and we will never know what that statement was, because that was one of the only times he was not recorded at DOC. And that is a statement he allegedly made to Dr. Walla that she wrote on notes that sometime later, who knows how long later, she entered into the electronic medical record and then shredded her notes. And she's the one, it's very arguable, she's the one who gave that story a beginning, a middle, and an end. We don't know, and we will never know what Rick Allen actually said.
Yeah. And also, the van was a big deal, obviously. And, Brian Harshman got up on the stand, and, he's a very serious-looking guy. And, he's the guy that said that's Rick Allen's voice on the video, for one, which I think was inappropriate. But, and that also sounded like, my Uncle Leo and everybody else, right? So, but Brian Harshman got up on the stand and said nobody else, and out there in the public knew about a white van or would talk about a white van. And then, one of the people that was working with, was trying to help us out. She said, no, let me see what I can find out. With a quick Google search, there was 20 to 25 mentions of van related to the Delphi case and all these, Reddit and all these other things, that anybody that was a big time Delphi follower, a fanatic like Dr. Walla, would have seen. So did this happen? Hey, Rick, was it that you were there and a van came up, a white van, and you saw this van? Is that what happened? Did you get scared? And did you leave? Yeah, I saw a van. Oh, I saw a van. We're not going to know those things.
Yeah, we're not going to know those things. Now, the 20 to 25 mentions of the white van, I think that's a very conservative estimate. There's going to be way more than that. If you consider things like live streams, if you consider social media as a whole, I think that probably was just on Reddit. But there's so many more times. Look, I've known about the white van since the year dot, and I live 4,500 miles away. I wasn't there. I didn't murder Abby and Libby. So I've got details that only the killer would know, according to the state. Let's move on to what I consider to be a timeline of events based on Libby's phone data that absolutely proves that the state's theory makes no sense. So this is what people who were in the courtroom gave. So this, I'm not going to play it, but this is a clip from Bob from Defence Diaries, Andrea Burkhart, Lawyer Lee. They were there. So we have these measurements, and also some of the mainstream media reporters also reported these measurements. These come from Libby's phone data. So from the Apple Health app. Libby's phone, between 1:31 p.m, which is when she must have picked it up at her house, and again, they were dropped off at like 1:48 at the Mears Farm entrance of the trails. So between 1:31 and 2:08, Libby's phone walked about 700 metres. So some of that would have been, walking from wherever she picked it up in her house to the car. So it's going to be a little under 700 metres. Where does that take us? Well, it's 600 and something metres from the Mears Farm entrance all the way down here to approximately a third of the way across the bridge, where that photo that isn't on Libby's phone appears to have been taken. So that was about approximately a third of the way across the bridge. Then between 2:08 and 2:18, Libby's phone walks a further 414 metres. So where does that take us? So from approximately a third of the way across the bridge to here, you've got maybe 160 metres. So we've got a further 254 metres to play with. Then there is no movement on the phone between 2:18 and 2:25. So these 7 minutes, the state believes that this is when the phone isn't moving because Rick Allen is forcing the girls to undress and is going to essay them. So that's 7 minutes. And according to the state, they're still on the south side of the creek. Because around 2:30, Brad Weber comes along here, and the time fits perfectly, doesn't it? So the state put it at 2:27 to 2:30. Brad Weber comes along. So, that's right about the time when the phone starts moving again. So 2:25 to 2:31, the phone walks a further 50 metres. 68 steps. The step count and the meters is wacky on that, but anyway. And then between 2:31 and 2:32, the phone registers 2 floors climbed, which is approximately 20 feet. Now, I did videos where I experimented with my own iPhone 6 because I have an old iPhone 6 that is in perfect working condition, and I took it out for a walk. It only records inclines, so going up stairs, steps, or a hill, and then the phone does not move again. Now, here's why this data makes no sense and disproves the state's timeline. Check this out. Now, this is only approximate. Let's do these measurements. We know where the 700 meters or thereabouts comes from. That takes us to about a third of the way across the bridge. So the contentious issue is this. The 414 meters, then the no movements for 7 minutes, and then the further 50 meters, and then the incline, where the phone walked up an incline of approximately 20 feet. All right, so let's measure this out. So from about a third of the way across the bridge, we've got approximately 160 meters. So from 208 to 218, Libby's phone walks 414 meters. How is that possible by the state's timeline? Because at 2:14, she's here, taking the BG video, and this is around 160 meters. So before 2:18, her phone walks a further 254 meters. Now, where does that take us? So 254 meters, well, it could take us all the way to the crime scene. That's 178 meters if you go in a straight line. Or if you go down this hill and then down here and cross here, so clothes were found in approximately this area and then go up here, 209 meters. Maybe they went down this hill along here, maybe under the bridge, and then to the crime scene. It's 290 meters. The upshot is, by 2:18, that 254 meters, and again, it's only approximate, doesn't make sense in the state's timeline, because if they've gone right the way over here, and then Brad Webber's van comes along here between 2:27 and 2:30, how is Rick Allen disturbed? Because he's already right the way over here, essaying them for 7 minutes, and then he kills it. How does it make sense? And then there's a further 50 meters to take into account, and between 2:31 and 2:32, 20 feet of an incline. This is not 20 feet of an incline. Look at the elevation change right down here, if you can see it. So from the middle of the creek is 168. Go up to the crime scene, 168 to 170. You only climb 2 meters, which is about 6.5 feet. So where's the 20 feet? That's like 2 flights of stairs, or a decent sized hill. Where's that? Based on Libby's phone data, the state's timeline does not work, because there's no way under the state's timeline that they could have walked 414 meters, then essayed for 7 minutes, then another 50 meters, and then a 20-foot incline of a climb. No way. The state's timeline falls right there. And that's what I really, really hope that the defence can hammer home to the jury if there is a second trial, because the jury could not put that together. It's very clear. They could not put that together. I have an alternate theory that does make sense. This is just one alternate theory. So trailhead to middle of the bridge, around 700 meters, so it's about a third of the way across the bridge. Ignore these distances because I reanalyzed it based on comments. Originally, I was measuring it to the middle of the bridge, but it looks like the photo's more like a third of the way across the bridge, so I need to change these. But up to 208, 700 meters takes us to a third of the way across the bridge. Then 440 meters. What if there's this? So we've got about 160 meters from the third of the way across the bridge to the end. And then a further 254 meters. That would take us to maybe a vehicle that was waiting down the road. The phone doesn't move for 7 minutes due to vehicle travel. because a phone won't register movements in a vehicle. Unless it's really, really bumpy, then it might. And then 50 metres, maybe walking from a vehicle to a building. And then maybe phone registers 2 floors climbed because maybe they walk up 2 flights of steps. That makes absolutely more sense to me. And then the phone doesn't move. The phone doesn't move again. But someone perhaps plugs in headphones at 5:44 and takes them out at 10:32. Now, Jennifer Auger makes a big deal about the headphones. So let's listen to what she said to Kyla Russell from WTHR.
If you could talk to them today, what would you want to ask them?
I mean, I want to know what they felt was important. I'd like to ask them what they felt about the timeline. To me, and this was my area, right? So I have a deep-seated attachment to this. But if you believe the state's timeline and you believe what the state story is, Libby's phone was under a shoe, under a body from at the very, very, very latest 3:50 p.m. on February 13th, and stayed there. And I've gone back again to look at the crime scene pictures. You cannot see that phone where it was, and it stayed there from 3:50 p.m. on the 13th until 12:15 p.m. on the 14th. During that time, according to the state, that phone never moved. Rick Allen never came back. But to me, the irrefutable evidence is at 5:44 p.m. on the 13th, someone manually plugged in headphones and at 10:32 p.m. unplugged them. That is absolutely inconsistent with the state's timeline.
Yeah, but it is refutable. And the 350 that she's talking about is, I think, based on Sarah Carbo seeing, allegedly, a muddy and bloody man at 356, 357 on County Road North. In my alternate theory, the reason why it doesn't move again is because it's set down somewhere. Maybe in someone's house, somewhere in Delphi, who lives around approximately 7 minutes drive away from the Morning High Bridge in 2017. It could be Patrick Westfall. Could be. Okay. Look, the headphones thing, I think, can be easily refuted. I think this timeline can be attacked in its own right, based on the movements of the phone. Plugging in headphones at 5:44 and taking them out again at 10:32 could absolutely have happened, but it's easily refuted. This is Lieutenant Jerry Holeman talking to Grey Hughes Investigates, interview from yesterday. Listen to this.
It's astounding that people literally think that somebody in the middle of the night, without moving the phone, reached their hand underneath, plugged in some headphones to see what was on there, and then later pulled it out. What do you think about that whole thing?
I think it's very unrealistic. I think you described it perfectly. I mean, in order to plug them in, you're going to have to, I think, move the phone a little bit. And when you move the phone, the screen light's going to come on. That's going to be reported. We knew that was one of the, Chris Cecil explained that he knew that was one of the options, but there just wasn't research done to prove that. And then obviously we knew that water and dirt in the port causes false readings. And that's what we believe happened. They went across the creek. They were dirty water. So we think it was a false reading.
Yeah, it could have been a false reading. Why it suddenly started to make a false reading at 5:44 if the girls had been there since 2:32 when the phone ceased moving? I don't know. But it's easily refutable. Now, the screen light coming on and stuff like that, well, you're not going to find that registering on Libby's phone because that comes from the Knowledge C database, which had been wiped by all of the different analysis that had been done, because it's not a permanent store, it's a temporary store, based on, I guess you would say, administrative issues relating to the phone, like turning the phone on and off, the screen light coming on, buttons being pressed. Is recording in the Knowledge C database, but it overwrites itself. So there's no way of knowing when the phone was turned on and turned off, or when the screen light came on and off, based on data from the Knowledge C database, because the state cocked up the analysis. But it is refutable, and I think that the defence needs to use this timeline, put it up in big visuals, and really attack the state's theory based on what we absolutely know from the state's own witness from Libby's phone data. So, there you have it. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.